Hi and welcome back guys for this very special 3-part series where we discuss the current, ongoing and what seems like never-ending conflict.
James, you said current, but let's look back first. Let's look at the history.
Oh, here we go, Niz, back with the history lesson, but I guess it's necessary given the current circumstances.
That's right, James. We need to know what led up to this. How did we get here? Well, to help understand the Palestinian and Israeli conflict.
It's not a conflict. A conflict is two equal sides.
Okay. Whatever you want to call it, oppression, occupation, war, genocide, ethnic cleansing, whatever you prefer to call it. I'm going to start off by looking back in history, and what I'm hoping to do is try and create a timeline from what I think is the beginning to the present, well into 2023. Where better to start than at the beginning, around 1250 before the Common Era. That's 1250 BC and the Promised Land.
Wow, 1250 BC. You're taking it right back, aren't you, bro? Sol, do you remember those times?
Hey, I'm old, but I'm not that old.
Okay. The reason I'm starting here is because you'll find that many Zionists base their claim on Palestinian land on religious grounds. They claim that it's their right by religious decree. So that's why I'm starting that far back. For example, the State of Israel has only one caveat for people who wish to settle in Israel, and it's that you must be Jewish.
Is that it?
Yeah. There's no tests like you have for the UK, where you have to pass the English for speakers of other languages. They don't call it immigration. It's returning home.
What about the Palestinians? Can they return home?
Right, so I'm guessing you're talking about the people who were displaced in 1948. No, they're not allowed to return to their homes in what is currently recognised as Israel.
So why not?
Simple. They're not Jewish.
That's not right.
No, but getting back to the Promised Land, you'll
fair.
find references to the Promised Land within the Torah, the Jewish holy book, and the Bible, the Christian holy book. Within the Torah and the Bible, there are many interpretations of how big and where the Promised Land is. Under the most expansive interpretations, they refer to the Promised Land as far west as the River Nile, encompassing the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt, as far north as the Euphrates River, this covers Lebanon and parts of Syria, as far east as the eastern borders of Jordan, and as far south as the Red Sea from Elit. So the Gulf of Aqaba, that's between the Sinai Peninsula and Saudi Arabia. You may also hear people referring to this as Judea or Samaria. The revisionists claim this as Greater Israel.
Who are the revisionists?
The revisionist Zionist is a group or sect within Zionism. So Islam has sects like the Sunni, Shia, Wahhabi.
So you're telling me Zionists have sects as well?
Yes,
Just
they
like
have.
Muslims?
Well, if you think about it, every single group has sects. So Zionism has their liberals on the left and it has their conservatives on the right. The revisionists are conservatives. They're on the right. The revisionists actually go on to become a terrorist organisation. They were called Irgun. Between 1931 and 1948, they then evolved into a political party. Guess what they called?
Go on.
Likud.
What does that mean?
What does what mean?
Ergun.
I think if you translate it to English, it means organisation.
Lame.
Boring.
Yeah, okay, let's get back to what we were talking about. So, as I was saying, Irgun then evolved into a political party, Likud, and Likud are the ones who are in power in Israel today. So does that make you think, they're very right-wing conservative? We'll cover more on this a little later. It's important with regards to current events, as it's the Likud party who is pushing for more land. They're pushing for the Greater Israel. Getting back on topic and to the Promised Land, as part of their covenant with the Lord, God said, I will give into your hands the people who live in the land, and you will drive them out before you. Do not make a covenant with them or with their gods. Do not let them live in your land, or they will cause you to sin against me, because the worship of their gods will certainly be a snare to you.
Is that the reason why they're pushing out the Palestinians then?
Yes, but this is looking back at history. When the Jews went to their Promised Land, said they went to Canaan, and the original people were Canaanites. So God said push them out. But yeah, you're right. They're probably pushing out the Palestinians today.
Sorry lads, my geography ain't the best. So is Canaan modern day Palestine then?
Yes, it's the same region. Yes, the same area. From this, you can see what seems to be driving some of the Zionists is their religious text. This gives you an indication of why Israel is trying to push the Palestinians out. But what you'll see today is Israel is claiming that Hamas is trying to wipe them off the map. And in matter of fact, this is what Israel is doing to the Palestinians.
Oh, so the oppressor is claiming to be the oppressed?
Exactly, yes.
Yes.
So in recent years, the Israeli government has actually made it a criminal offence to show the Palestinian flag, and somehow they've persuaded foreign governments to do the same. I mean, I don't know if you guys remember, but in the UK, Suella Braverman made it an offence to show the Palestinian flag in 2023.
Yeah, I recall that.
Wasn't the same for Ukraine though.
Yep, hypocrisy all over.
Okay, what about Palestine? And you mentioned something about Judea and Samaria. I think that's how it's pronounced. I'm not sure.
Yeah. So regarding Judea and Samaria, we're looking back at about 1000 BC. And as I mentioned before, the area was called Canaan. The first use of the word Palestine was around 500 BC. I've only given you a very small aspect of the biblical argument that is made for the occupation of Palestine. And of course, we've not covered the people of the Promised Land being exiled because they disobeyed their Lord. When I've questioned this with supporters of Israel who use religious grounds, they tell me not all tribes were exiled, but only those who broke the covenant.
If someone's been exiled, how are they allowed to come back to the Promised Land?
Yeah, when I've had this argument, they've just said not all tribes were exiled. So, like we've got our sects, they've got their sects as well. And actually what you'll find is not all Jews believe Israel should be created. And that's why you'll find them protesting alongside those who are seeking peace.
Yeah, but it's a bit weird though. It's like, if you're exiled from this house, let's say you and Sol are exiled, but Sol's tribe isn't, and then I move in, and then a decade later, Sol wants to come back and say, this is my house.
Oh, you're touching on a subject I'm going to cover in a bit, actually. Very good point, Dims. Just bring that up to country level. The people in the US trying to return to the UK, or the Europeans returning from their colonial cities, claiming it as theirs. For me personally, I don't think religion should play any part in justifying the killing, torture, or humiliation of a group of people. And I don't think Zionism is just a Jewish group. You'll regularly hear how Christians and evangelicals, can't even pronounce that, support this because they want to bring about the end of times. Bring it to 1799. Napoleon offers Palestine as a homeland to the Jews. While doing my research, I found that Palestine is a much sought after land, not just on religious grounds, but also as a base to project power and influence in the Middle East. It's a very much sought after trade route between the East and the West. Napoleon saw this, and in his efforts to beat the Ottoman Empire and establish a French presence, he offered Palestine as a homeland to the Jews under French protection. All Napoleon required was for the Jewish inhabitants of Palestine to revolt against the rulers at the time.
Wait, sorry, I thought the State of Israel was created in 1947?
48.
1948?
Yeah, but I'm looking way back into history because it didn't just appear. It was worked on in the background. First example, 1799, was where Napoleon was trying to gain a foothold, French presence in Arabia.
So were they in their land at the time?
Jewish people were there, but they were living under the Ottoman Empire. And peacefully, I'll tell you, peacefully.
This includes Christians as well. So Muslims, Jews and Christians live peacefully in Palestine.
Also, they can coexist in harmony.
Yes.
Yeah, so
That's right, yeah. So that was the first instance I found of the idea of a Jewish homeland. Now we're going to jump forward to 1882, a city called Rishon LeZion. It's a major Zionist settlement, and it was established in Palestine. I repeated that because it was still Palestine in 1882. Napoleon was not the only one seeking to gain a foothold in the region. The British Foreign Secretary, Lord Palmerston, wrote to the ambassador in Constantinople, urging him to convince the Sultan to open Palestine for the immigration of Jews. The immigration of Jews to Palestine was supported by wealthy benefactors such as Baron Edmund de Rothschild. He was a Jew. He spent over 14 million French francs to establish Jewish settlements, and the first settlement, financed by the Baron, was Rishon LeZion, and this is where he is buried today. Moving forward to 1885, the term Zionism was first coined. In 1885, the Austrian writer Nathan Birnbaum, I hope I pronounced his name correctly, coined the term Zionism. It's derived from the word Zion, which is one of the biblical names of Jerusalem. Zionism came to mean the establishment of a Jewish homeland in Palestine, but not all Jews supported this.
Just like the Matrix.
Yes, Zion is used as the homeland in many TV series, or even people aspiring to find a new home. Now we're going to move forward to 1896. Theodor Herzl publishes Der Grundstat, calling for the creation of a Jewish state. Theodor Herzl, an Austro-Hungarian journalist, wrote a book called The Jewish State. Herzl envisioned the founding of a future independent Jewish state. The book is one of the most important texts of early Zionism. Straight after that, in 1897, the first Zionist Congress is held in Switzerland. The first Zionist organization is founded. The Zionist movement, founded by Theodor Herzl and other leaders, advocated for the establishment of a Jewish homeland in Palestine. Widespread anti-Semitism and persecution of Jewish communities in Europe in the late 19th and early 20th centuries served as a major catalyst for the Zionist movement. Jews faced discrimination, violence, and pogroms.
Why is a pogrom?
It's a violent, organized riot or attack directed at Jews, and this was happening in many parts of Europe.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Pogrom. Interesting. It seems like the Israelis are now doing a pogrom on the Palestinians.
Interesting you should mention that. As part of my research, I was going through a couple of websites, and there's a Jewish peaceful website which now states Palestinians are victims of pogroms.
It's like the abused becoming the abuser.
Yeah, pretty much. Okay, getting back to 1897, Theodor Herzl and his colleague Max Nordau sent 2 rabbis to Palestine to investigate the prospect for a Jewish state. The report returned to Theodor Herzl and his colleague read, "The bride is beautiful, but she is married to another man."
Wait a minute, whose bride?
Right, I was reading a quote. So the report that came back from these colleagues, these rabbis, the quote read, "The bride is beautiful, Palestine is beautiful, but she is married to another man. The land is already occupied."
Oh, it's a reference. I get it.
In 1897 as well, they founded the Zionist organization, and I quote, "Zionism's aim is to establish for the Jewish people a publicly and legally assured home in Palestine."
So let me get this right. The state of Israel didn't exist.
No, we're still in 1897. Israel didn't exist. But this is their claim. They claim that Israel existed for a long time. No, Israel didn't exist, but the Jewish people did. The Jewish people have a long history, not Israel. It's important to mention that the desire for a homeland initially manifested in Central and Eastern Europe. This was due to the levels of anti-Semitism endured by the Jewish people. Anti-Semitism, such as the injustice against Dreyfus.
Dreyfus?
Yeah, so he was a Jew in the French army. In 1894, he fell victim to a judicial conspiracy that sparked a major political crisis during the Third Republic, known as the Dreyfus Affair. This was when he was wrongfully accused and convicted due to anti-Semitism. He was convicted of being a spy for the German Empire.
All right, cool. Thanks for explaining that, Niz, your history buff.
Well, that's one of the examples of the kind of anti-Semitism the Jews faced in Europe. And the pogroms, which we explained before, that was the main thing from the Russian Empire. During the early years of Zionism, some members were open to a Jewish state outside of Palestine. They picked areas such as Uganda, Argentina, Cyprus, and even the Sinai Peninsula. But finally, everyone agreed that the Jewish state can only be in Palestine. At this point, the organisation started working on funding and organising the settlement of European Jews in what was the Ottoman-controlled Palestine, which later on became British-controlled mandate for Palestine. Now we move on into the 20th century, 1901, founding of the Jewish National Fund. During the Zionist movement to settle Jews in Palestine, the movement raised money to support those who would immigrate to Palestine, helping them buy land and the tools to farm the land. One such organisation was the Jewish National Fund. This was a non-profit organisation, the JNF. It was founded to buy and develop land in Ottoman Syria for Jewish settlement. Ottoman Syria would later be known as the Mandate of Palestine and subsequently be known as Israel and the Palestinian territories. Moving forward, 1907, Zionist leader Chaim Weizmann visits Palestine for the first time. Chaim Weizmann set out to establish a company in Jaffa to develop the land of Palestine, the Palestine Land Development Company. His venture was supported by Baron de Rothschild.
Is it still Palestine or is it Israel state there now?
No, so we're in 1907 and
Palestine or is it Israel state there now?
No, so we're in 1907 and this is Palestine under the Ottoman Empire. And what I've just talked about is companies and sponsorship to try and buy land and then help the Jews to settle there.
By the Rothschilds?
By the Rothschilds, yes, but then also by the Zionist movement. From 1907 on to 1908, Palestinian writer Najib Nasser publishes Al-Carmel newspaper opposing Zionist colonization. He was a Palestinian Christian. His first issue was published in December 1908, with the statist purpose of opposing Zionist colonization. The paper made editorial warnings of the dangers posed by Zionism to the Palestinian people.
Also, they were planning a takeover that far back.
Yeah, so that's what Theodor Herzl and his paper was about. But the Palestinians, the majority of them, were open-minded. They welcomed all people.
So Palestinians are very hospitable, unlike the Western media, where they always portray him as barbaric.
Or terrorists.
Yeah, that's right. You'll see a lot of hypocrisy in Western media. Right, get back to the timeline, and we're going to now move on to 1915. In 1915, Herbert Samuel, a British politician and cabinet member, wrote a memorandum titled The Future of Palestine. In this document, he advocated for the British annexation of Palestine. Samuel envisioned Palestine as a future homeland for the Jewish people under British rule, aligning with Zionist aspirations while also serving British strategic interests in the region. So as we've mentioned, at this point, it's still under Ottoman Empire rule, but the British want it, and they want it for their own purpose. Okay, moving on to 1916, and this was a pivotal year. This is where the Sykes and Picot secret agreement is signed, dividing the Middle East between the French and the British. Great Britain has a very important role in the occupation of Palestinian land. The British used the Bedouin Arabs to overthrow the Ottoman Empire, and in return they promised the Arabs the right to self-governance. Unfortunately, this was only the case for the Arabian Peninsula. The rest would fall under mutually agreed spheres of influence. This is what the Sykes and Picot Agreement was, an agreement by the French and the British governments to manage the territories outside of the Arabian Peninsula. And right after 1916, you had this very important Balfour Declaration. This was a letter from the British Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour to Lord Walter Rothschild, expressing British support for the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. In 1917, the Zionists were able to gain the support of foreign governments for their aspirations, and the most pivotal moment was the Balfour Declaration in 1917. This was already in the making since the declaration of war on the Ottoman Empire in 1914. This declaration was made with no input or deliberation from the indigenous population of Palestine. Although the declaration was vague and it didn't offer any safeguards against the indigenous population, it was able to cement the recognition and support of the Zionist movement.
So is this when the state of Israel was actually created?
No, this is where they cemented the support of the British government. The British said, if we take control, we will give it to you. Then, in 1919, parallel to the Paris Peace Conference, Prince Faisal bin Hussein met with Chaim Weizmann.
Prince Faisal, so take it he's some Saudi prince then?
No, so he was the king of Iraq during that time, and we already know who the Chaim Weizmann is. He was the leader of the Zionist movement. These two signed an agreement that became to be known as the Faisal-Weizmann Agreement. The agreement outlined the prince's approval of a Jewish homeland in Palestine and an Arab nation in the larger Middle East. The prince signed the agreement, adding that it was dependent as the conditions would never be met. In 1920, the League of Nations granted Britain the mandate to administer Palestine following the dissolution of the Ottoman Empire at the end of World War I. The Zionists were very highly educated and well organised compared to the Palestinians of that time. As well as immigration, in ever greater numbers, and land acquisition, some groups in this movement took a more radical and violent path. As I've mentioned before, the movement had different groups of people who had different views on how they can reach their goal. But some groups within the movement also took what some call extreme views and violent measures. This is very important. Today, Israel claims it is a victim of terrorism, but it's no different to the actions Zionists committed against the Palestinians and the British. Terrorist organizations such as the Haganah, Irgun, and Lehi are praised by the Israelis for the actions they committed in the independence of Israel. This involved bombings such as blowing up the British embassy in Italy, chemical terrorism such as poisoning Palestinian wells, and shootings of Palestinian villages.
They are still doing it now.
Yes, but now state terrorism. Then, in 1922, the League of Nations approves the British mandate for Palestine and its purpose of helping establish a Jewish homeland. Great Britain was given control of Palestine, which was known as Mandate for Palestine. Important note here, this also included what is known as Jordan today.
Jordan, isn't that right next door to Palestine?
Yeah, so Palestine was collectively Israel, Gaza Strip, West Bank and Jordan. But the British in 1921 agreed that Abdullah bin Hussein would administer the territory, which was then known as Transjordan and today referred to as Jordan. This is important as it reduced the territory the Zionist movement was hoping to. Interesting side note, Irgun, if you have a look at their emblem.
Irgun, is that the Zionist society that you mentioned earlier?
No, the terrorist group.
Yeah, the terrorist group. Their emblem actually has a picture of Palestine and Jordan because they hoped that they would actually control the entire territory.
So that was the initial idea then?
That's it, yes. They wanted full control.
Well, they're taking what they can now, aren't they?
But getting back, early Zionist leaders described Palestine as a land without a people for a people without a land. This is important. I'll repeat that. Early Zionists described Palestine as a land without a people for a people without a land. And this is what the Zionist movement in Israel today is trying to advocate. They're trying to advocate Palestine never existed. But when the Jews arrived in Palestine, they found not only a vacant land, but a land inhabited by Palestinian Arabs. The consequent establishment of Israel resulted in a Palestinian diaspora. Just as the Jews were pushed out of their homes, the Zionists were now pushing the Palestinians out of their home. So, initially, I'll give you some figures. The Palestinian population was about 532,000. Out of these, 8% were Jewish, 10% were Christian, and 80% Muslim.
So when was this again?
1990. And then, by 1922, the population had grown to 752,000. So remember, this is now after Jewish migration. 11% were Jewish, 9% were Christian, and 78% Muslim. And then finally, just before 1948, which was the declaration of the State of Israel, the population was 1,970,000. Out of these, 31% were Jewish, 7% were Christian, and 59% were Muslim.
So 1948 was the birth of state as we know it today.
That's right, yes. But we're not there yet. We're still in 1922. The increase in the Jewish population was all due to the migration of Jews from Europe to Palestine with the support of the British government and the Zionist movement. In 1922, land ownership was 78% Muslim, 11% Jewish, and 10% Christian. And then jumping forward to 1945, it had become 60% Muslim, 30% Jewish, and 8% Christian. This tells you the level of impact immigration and land acquisition had for the Jewish people, for the Zionist movement. Moving on to 1929, the Al-Aqsa uprising. This is the first mass protests against increased Jewish immigration to Palestine. The Al-Aqsa uprising marked a significant turning point in the conflict over Palestine. It represented the first large-scale demonstration against the rising influx of Jewish immigrants into the region. Sparked by tensions surrounding the Western Wall, known to Muslims as the Al-Aqsa Wall.
You mean the Wailing Wall?
Yeah. So to Jews it's known as the Wailing Wall, to Muslims it's known as the Al-Aqsa Wall. These tensions were fueled by Palestinian fears of losing their land and identity amidst the growing Jewish settlement. The protests escalated into violence, resulting in casualties and deepening the divide between Arab and Jewish communities in Palestine. The Al-Aqsa uprising not only underscored the profound complexities of the region's history, but also foreshadowed the strife that would characterize the struggle for control over Palestine for decades to come. The 1930s is known as the Arab Revolt. This was a period of intense Arab resistance and rebellion against British colonial rule and Jewish immigration in the Mandate of Palestine. It occurred from around 1936 to 1939. It was triggered by several factors, including Arab frustration over land disposition, Jewish immigration, and economic disparities. For example, in 1933, mass protests against Jewish immigration to Palestine I think this is where the Palestinians started to wake up to the fact that Zionists were secretly infiltrating Palestine with the aim of wiping Palestine off the map and replacing it with a Jewish state.
So it sounds like the Palestinians were okay initially with the Jews coming in, thinking, okay, there's a bit of land there, that's fine, we understand, you can come have that. But when they realised that this is turning into a takeover, they started basically kicking off or defending themselves.
Yeah, that's pretty much right. Once they realised that they were going to lose their homes, they were going to lose their land, they started to stand. Side note, in 1935, Izz-ad-Din al-Qasim, he was a revolutionary leader in Palestine, was killed by British forces. He was a Muslim preacher and a leader in the local struggles against British mandatory rule and a militant opponent of Zionism. Al-Qasim wrote to the Palestinian leadership in Jerusalem proposing revolution, but the leadership thought they could win Palestinian rights through negotiation. In 1936, as part of the Palestinian struggles, the Palestinian people went on a long general strike.
What do you mean, strikes?
So there was two prongs to this struggle. There was the armed struggle, and then you also had those who were protesting. So previously I mentioned to you, the leadership thought that they could win Palestinian rights through negotiation. This is where strikes came into force. So this is where they would protest for their rights. But then there was another group like Izz-ad-Din al-Qasim who thought, no, we needed to take up arms and fight for what was theirs.
Like freedom fighters then?
Yep. This then forced the British to investigate and examine the cause of the Arab revolt in Palestine. In 1937, the UK Peel Commission report made a significant public acknowledgement of the entrenched conflict in Palestine. In response, the Commission recommended the partitioning of Palestine as a proposed solution. This marked a pivotal moment in the region's history as it highlighted the deep-seated divisions between the Arab and Jewish populations and set a stage for future deliberations and actions regarding the territorial dispute.
So the beef was with the immigrant Jews, not the Jews that were there previously, because they used to get on with them, didn't they, as well as the Christians?
That's right. So the Jews and the Christians who were already living there, they all lived peacefully. Muslims, Jews and Christians all lived peacefully. It was the Zionist movement which was pushing immigration of European Jews into Palestine.
So it's not like they keep making it into a religious war. It wasn't a Muslim v Jew thing. It was more like a Palestinian united against this new state of Israel, occupying state.
In 1937, before 1948, it was fighting Zionism. In 1938, the armed Zionist group Irgun launches a series of attacks against Palestinians. In 1939, the British government issued a policy document known as the White Paper of 1939. This significantly altered the British mandate's approach to Jewish immigration to Palestine and land purchases. The policy was a response to the Arab revolt and increasing tensions between the Jewish and Arab population in Palestine. The White Paper limited Jewish immigration to Palestine to 75,000 people over 5 years and imposed severe restrictions on Jewish land purchases. The White Paper also proposed the establishment of an independent Palestine within 10 years, governed jointly by Jews and Arabs. The policy was seen as a response to Arab demands but was strongly opposed by the Jewish community, especially amidst the growing persecution of Jews in Europe. Moving on to 1942, US Zionists meet in New York and adopt the Built More program. This was a call for the establishment of a Palestine as a Jewish Commonwealth and for unlimited immigration.
Wait, what was that? Unlimited immigration? Who decided that?
So if you remember, the British released a white paper in 1939 to appease the Palestinians and they limited Jewish immigration.
Exactly, yeah.
But in 1942, the Zionist movement met to say, no, there should be unlimited immigration.
And what did the Palestinians have to say about that? They weren't asked.
Of course, they're not happy, but they weren't asked. This was the Zionists meeting. This is where they established the Built More program. And this is very important that happened in the US. This is where the Zionists have been very successful. They have made political friendships which have supported them up to today.
Alliances and allegiances go that far back. Wow.
Exactly, yes. So this process advocated for unlimited Jewish immigration, and the emphasis or the importance was on creating a safe haven for Jews in the light of the persecution and atrocities they faced in Europe during World War II. The Biltmore program crystallized the Zionist commitment to statehood and immigration, setting the stage for future diplomatic and political endeavors aimed at realizing these objectives. Moving on to 1946, and I'm going to pick one date from 1946. This was the Irgun bombing of the King David Hotel in Jerusalem. This killed 91 people. I'm bringing this up because this was labelled a terrorist act, but these actions are celebrated and the people honoured in Israel. For example, when Rishi Sunak visited Israel after the events of the 7th of October, he stayed in the King David Hotel in Jerusalem. The hotel was used as the administrative headquarters for the British during its mandate. It was bombed by the terrorist group Irgun in July 1946, killing 91 and injuring 46. Today, there's a plaque commemorating and celebrating the bombing and murder of Britons and Arabs.
Hold on. So let me get this right. They have a plaque celebrating the terrorist attack.
Yeah. So what we class as a terrorist attack, they actually celebrate.
Who's they?
The Zionists, yes.
And they killed British people as well.
They killed British people, yes.
In that terrorist act.
In that bombing, yes. But the saddest thing is that the British Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, stayed there.
So what Irgun, isn't it?
Irgun, yeah.
Yeah. So what Irgun did, it's fine. But if anybody else did that, it'd be wrong.
Well, yeah, that's pretty much what the British Prime Minister was saying when he stayed at the King David Hotel. And there's a plaque there celebrating the murder of British citizens. Then, in 1947, the UN adopts Resolution 181, a partition plan for Palestine. Unfortunately, the Palestinians reject it. The resolution recommended the partition of Palestine into separate Jewish and Arab states, with Jerusalem under international administration. Jewish leaders accepted the plan, but the Arabs rejected it.
And why do you think they rejected it?
Well, the plan envisaged giving indigenous Palestinians 42% of the land and the Zionists 56% of the land. This was absurd, as the indigenous population was twice the size of the Zionists, but somehow the Palestinians would only get 42%. We are now at 1948. This was a pivotal year, as this was the year the State of Israel was founded.
Formally, yeah?
Formally, yes. So I'm going to go through a couple of months and just quickly read out some specific events. So 1948 January, armed Zionist group Haganah bombs the Semiramis Hotel in Jerusalem. More than 20 people are killed.
Who's Haganah? Is this a new group now? Because before it was Irgun.
So Haganah was the lead group. They would be able to control the others. They controlled Lehi and Irgun. Haganah was more of a liberal terrorist group. I don't know if you can have one of those.
Can't really know, but yeah.
But Irgun was more right wing.
Right.
Then 1948 February, Zionist forces attack the village of Caesarea near Haifa, an early example of ethnic cleansing. 1948 April, Stern Gang and Irgun forces massacre Palestinians in the village of Deir Yassin near Jerusalem.
Do you have any figures on the casualties or the fatalities?
Unfortunately not. The Deir Yassin massacre, there was hundreds of Palestinian Arabs killed.
It was a massacre and it was a village, so I'm guessing it would equate to at least equivalent of October the 7th.
Yes. And now we get to 1948, May. The State of Israel is created, sparking regional conflict. Great Britain terminates the mandate over Palestine and Israel declares independence on the 15th of May. The first large-scale displacement of Palestinian refugees, the 15th of May, becomes an official day to mark the Palestinian Nakba. Also, the first Arab-Israeli war broke out, and this was when 5 Arab nations, Egypt, Transjordan, Iraq, Syria and Lebanon, invaded. Firstly, the areas in southern and eastern Palestine, not apportioned to the Jewish state by the UN partition of Palestine, and later East Jerusalem. Count Folk Barnadette was appointed the UN mediator in Palestine by the UN General Assembly. He was assassinated 4 months later by a Zionist militant group. The Security Council established a group of military observers to supervise the truce, which later became UNTSO.
So which countries got involved in the 1948 war?
That was Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon and Iraq. They all joined the struggle, but to no avail. During the war, both sides committed the most unthinkable atrocities. More than 700,000 Palestinians were made refugees with no right of return to their ancestral homeland.
Wait, the point of this war was to stop the state of Israel existing, is that right?
That's right, but unfortunately, the Arab nations were no match for the Israeli organization. In 1948, December, the UN General Assembly passes Resolution 194, affirming the right of return of Palestinian refugees. By February 1949, an armistice agreement is agreed with Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria. In May 1949, UNGA, that's United Nations General Assembly, adopts Resolution 273, admitting Israel as a UN member. Then in December of 1949, the UN establishes UNRWA, an agency for Palestinian refugees. In 1950, Jordan assumes administrative control of the West Bank. In 1950, Israel moves its capital from Tel Aviv to the western part of Jerusalem in defiance of UN resolutions, and the West Bank is brought formally under Jordanian control. In 1956, the State of Israel massacres Palestinians in the villages of Qalqilia, Kufar Qasim, and Han Yunis. This is part of the invasion of the Sinai Peninsula. This was done with the approval of France and Great Britain. This was to capture the Suez Canal, as it was an important economic trading route, and the European partners sought complete control. Israel was forced to withdraw its troops from the Sinai Peninsula by the United States and the Soviet Union. Also in 1959, while there was state-on-state fighting, the Palestinian people grew tired, and so began an insurgency which saw the rise of the organization, such as Fatah. They would conduct guerrilla warfare operations against Israel. The Fatah movement was founded in 1949 by members of the Palestinian diaspora. They were principally professionals working in the Persian Gulf states, such as Kuwait. The founders were Salah Khalaf, Khalil al-Wazir, and Yasser Arafat. The founders had studied in Cairo or Beirut and had been refugees in Gaza. The PLO,
The Palestinian Liberation Organization?
yeah, that's the one, was founded in 1964 during an Arab League summit in Cairo. They were set up to represent Palestinian aspirations of self-determination and a state. Initially led by Ahmad Shukiri, the PLO later embraced armed struggle and later diplomacy to achieve its goals. Yasser Arafat became a prominent leader and became the face of the PLO and the Palestinian movement until his death in 2004. The PLO is currently led by Mahmoud Abbas. In 1966, a tragic event unfolded in the village of Asuma when Israeli forces carried out a massacre of Palestinians. This violent incident resulted in the deaths of numerous Palestinian civilians and inflicted significant harm on the community. The massacre at Suma exemplifies the intense and often brutal nature of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, underscoring the human toll and suffering endured by Palestinian communities amidst the struggle for land, rights and sovereignty. In 1967, Israel launches a surprise attack on Egypt, which develops into a regional war with the other neighbouring nations. More formally known as the Six-Day War, it lasted from June the 5th to June the 10th. This was a brief but intense conflict in the Middle East. It was primarily between Israel and a coalition of Arab states including Egypt, Jordan and Syria. It resulted in an overwhelming victory for Israel and a capture of large swathes of territory from the surrounding Arab states, creating an important defensive buffer for Israel, reunifying Jerusalem, which came under Jewish sovereignty for the first time in nearly 2,000 years. The UN Security Council passes Resolution 242 calling on Israel to withdraw from territories it occupied in 1967.
So was this illegal?
Yeah, it breaks international law. Right, moving on to 1968, the UN Special Committee is established to investigate Israeli practices affecting the human rights of the Palestinian people and other Arabs of the occupied territories. In 1970, Israel attacks Palestinian fighters during Black September in Jordan. This is where Israel launched attacks against Palestinian fighters on Jordanian territory. The conflict erupted amidst escalating tensions between the Jordanian government and the Palestinian militant groups operating within Jordanian territory. The Israeli intervention further complicated the already volatile situation, exacerbating the conflict and causing significant loss of life and displacement among both Palestinians and Jordanian populations. The events of Black September underscored interconnectedness of regional dynamics and the enduring complexities of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
So this Black September, the Palestinians are not fighting against the Israelis, they're fighting against the Jordanians. Is that right?
Not against the Jordanian population, against the Jordanian monarchy. So the PLO, who had their base at the Jordanian border town of Karama, they were seeking to overthrow the Jordanian monarchy. Black September is important because it gives rise to the terrorist group Black September. Black September go on to carry out the first major terrorist attack on Israel. During this attack, 11 members of the Israeli Olympic team competing in the 1972 Munich Olympics in Germany were taken hostage and eventually killed by the group.
So they killed him. Why would they do that?
So the Palestinians were getting desperate. And just like I mentioned before, there's left and right. Black September were a more conservative group.
From what? PLO? So it's the offshore PLO?
From PLO, yes.
They seem quite extreme.
Extreme tactics.
Yeah. Just like...
Irgun.
Just in the same token, what this extreme group was doing is wrong as well, I guess. But I think it's just fight for land, wasn't it? Freedom.
It is freedom, recognition. Moving on to 1973, Egypt and Syria launched a surprise attack on Israel during Yom Kippur.
What's Yom Kippur?
That's one of the holiest days in Judaism. The conflict resulted in a ceasefire, and Israel eventually withdrew from the Sinai Peninsula as part of the 1979 Camp David Accords. But during that period, the UN also passed a resolution 338 calling for the ceasefire and the implementation of Resolution 242, which was negotiations between all parties. In 1974, the UN General Assembly and the Arab League recognized the PLO as the sole legitimate representatives of the Palestinian people. The General Assembly reaffirms inalienable rights of Palestinian people to self-determination, independence and sovereignty, and refugees return. Resolution 3236.
So at least they got some representation that's recognised now. Was this the time Yasser Arafat was in charge of the PLO?
That's correct, yes. Then in 1975, the Committee on the Exercise of Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People was founded by Resolution 3376. In 1977, the UN, pursuant to Resolution 32/40, International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian People is celebrated annually on the 29th of November.
So what, an Independence Day type of thing? Like, I don't get it. What do you mean?
Yeah, so on the 29th of November every year, they march not in protest, but in solidarity with the Palestinian people. In 1978, after 2 weeks of clandestine discussions at Camp David in the United States, Egyptian President Anwar Sadat and Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin reached a historic agreement on a framework for peace in the Middle East. This landmark accord, known as the Camp David Accords, laid the groundwork for a comprehensive peace treaty between Egypt and Israel. Among its key provisions was a commitment to end hostilities, normalise diplomatic relations, and resolve long-standing disputes through peaceful means.
Sounds good. I wonder why that didn't work out.
Initially, it's only between Israel and Egypt. This doesn't even involve Palestine.
Right, okay.
The Camp David Accords represented a significant breakthrough in Arab-Israeli relations and paved the way for subsequent negotiations and diplomatic initiatives. The treaty or accord led to Israel's withdrawal from the Sinai Peninsula. We see many cases where a nation's support is bought or negotiated with money, protection or recognition. An example of this is how Moroccan sovereignty over Western Sahara was recognized by the US in exchange for establishing relations with Israel, or the US assuring Saudi Arabia's security in return for recognizing Israel.
So what about the Palestinians? It looks like they have nothing out of this.
No, the Palestinians gain nothing out of this. If anything, these foreign nations, Egypt, Morocco, Saudi Arabia, they all become actors of Israel. In 1982, Israel invades Lebanon with the intention of eliminating the PLO. After a ceasefire, the PLO forces withdraw to neighbouring countries, but despite the guarantees of safety for Palestinian refugees left behind, there are massacres at Sabra and Shatila camps.
Sounds like a lot of massacres took place then.
Yeah, there's many listed and I've not even touched on them. Now we get to 1987. The first Intifada is launched in the occupied Palestinian territories.
Intifada? What does that even mean?
It means uprising or rebellion, and it begins in the Jabalia refugee camp in the Gaza Strip. The first Intifada was a period of widespread Palestinian protest, civil disobedience and acts of violence against Israelis that began in December 1987, and it continued into the early 1990s. The Intifada was sparked by a combination of factors including frustrations with the Israeli control of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, economic hardships, and the lack of political progress towards a Palestinian state.
So the Palestinians are the rebels and the Israeli are the empire.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it sounds like this was the point where they start to stand up for themselves.
the Palestinians started to stand up for themselves. In 1988, the PLO accepts UN resolutions 242 and 338, recognizing the State of Israel. In July of 1988, Jordan renounces claims to the West Bank and recognizes PLO as the sole legitimate representative of the Palestinian people. In November of the same year, in Algiers, the Palestinian National Council adopted the Declaration of Independence of the State of Palestine. In December of the same year, PLO chair Yasser Arafat addressed the UN in Geneva. The Palestine National Council accepted UN Security Council resolutions 242 and 338. In 1991, the Madrid Peace Conference ends without a breakthrough. The conference was a pivotal diplomatic effort co-sponsored by the United States and the Soviet Union to address the Arab-Israeli conflict. It brought together representatives from Israel, Arab states and the Palestinians to engage in both bilateral negotiations and multilateral discussions. 1993. The Oslo Accords were a pair of transitional agreements signed by Israel and PLO that were designed to establish a partnership for negotiating border disputes, creating Palestinian self-governance through the creation of the Palestinian Authority, and over time, the hope was this would lead to a peaceful solution to the conflict and a two-state solution.
Right, so this is the first time we're hearing about the two-state solutions.
Yes. Then, in 1994, the Jordan-Israel Peace Treaty, signed in 1994, is an agreement between Jordan and Israel that recognizes each other's sovereignty, establishes their international boundary, and promotes security and economic cooperation.
So, yeah, first you're hearing of a two-state solution, but it sounds like only one state's getting all the economic benefits.
Yeah, so we're going to move on to that. That was Oslo 1, and now we're going to move on to Oslo 2. This was in 1995. On November the 4th of that year, Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, a long-time major political figure in Israeli politics and the head of the left-wing Labour Party, was assassinated by Israeli extremist Yigal Amir at a peace rally in Tel Aviv.
That would have been the best time for both Palestinian and Israel, I would say.
And that's the issue. Whenever there's a step forward, someone steps in and ruins it. So Yitzhak Rabin guaranteed that a two-state solution, but unfortunately the right-wing Zionists didn't want this. So that was Oslo 2, giving the Palestinians a little bit more control in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Then in 1966, the Palestinian general elections are held. This marks a pivotal moment in Palestinian history. These elections were significant as they were the first democratic elections in the Palestinian territories, including the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. The elections allowed Palestinians to vote for members of the Palestinian Legislative Council, PLC, as well as for the president of the Palestinian Authority. The outcome of these elections saw Yasser Arafat elected as president, solidifying his leadership role within the Palestinian Authority. The 1996 Palestinian general elections were a crucial step towards establishing democratic governance and self-determination for the Palestinian people. Then, in 1977, Israel and the PLO signed the Hebron Protocol, also known as the Hebron Agreement. This agreement outlined the phased withdrawal of Israeli forces from the city of Hebron in the West Bank and establishing security arrangements for the area. It also set out the responsibilities of both Israeli and Palestinian authorities in Hebron, aiming to mitigate tensions and promote stability in the region. The Hebron Protocol marked a significant step towards implementing the Oslo Accords and fostering cooperation between Israel and the Palestinian Authority. We now come to the year 2000 and the start of the Second Intifada, also known as the Al-Aqsa Intifada. This was a period of intense conflict and Palestinian uprising against Israeli rule that began in late September 2000 and continued for several years. The Intifada was characterized by widespread protests, demonstrations, suicide bombings, and armed confrontations between Israeli security forces and Palestinian freedom fighters. This was all triggered by Ariel Sharon's visit to the Al-Aqsa Mosque in September 2000.
Which is in Jerusalem, isn't it?
That's right, yes. Al-Aqsa Mosque lies just above the Wailing Wall. This is where the Zionists wish to rebuild Solomon's Temple.
The Third Temple.
In 2002, Israel reoccupies the Palestinian cities in the West Bank in the wake of the Second Intifada. Also in 2002, the UN Security Council passes Resolution 1397, affirming the vision of a two-state solution to the conflict. The quartet, consisting of the UN, the EU, the US and Russia, is established with a mandate to help mediate Israeli-Palestinian conflict and support Palestinian economic development and institution building. During the summit in Beirut, the League of Arab States adopted the Arab Peace Initiative. In 2003, the Roadmap for Peace is published by the Quartet and is endorsed by the Security Council in Resolution 1515. This roadmap outlined a series of steps aimed at resolving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and achieving a two-state solution. It called for reciprocal actions by both parties, including an end to violence, Palestinian political reforms, and a freeze on Israeli settlement expansion in the West Bank. We now move on to 2004. That's the year Yasser Arafat dies. He was the leader of the PLO and also the Fatah.
Did he die of natural causes?
His autopsy was done in France, and I don't believe it was natural causes.
What was the official word, or is there an official? I think, did it come out Israel?
There was a suspicion it was Israel, but I don't think there's any official.
It seems like every time there's a two-state solution on the table, someone mysteriously dies. Is that just me, or do you see a pattern happening here?
No, that is true. Every time you get close to peace, someone always ends up scuppering it. Moving on. Also in 2004, the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, issues an advisory opinion on the legality of construction of a wall in the occupied Palestinian territory.
The wall? Are we talking about the Iron Dome?
No, this is the barrier that Israel has created between the recognised Israeli territory and the West Bank, which was captured by Israel from Jordan, which is seen as any future Palestinian state. As a result to the Intifada, they built these walls to stop movement of Palestinians to Israeli territory.
Oh, so that's where you get the open-air prison from.
The open-air prison, yes, that's it, correct. The ICJ concluded that the construction of the barrier, which Israel referred to as a security measure, was in violation of international law. The court stated that the barrier's route, which extended into the West Bank, infringed upon the rights of the Palestinian population and impeded their right to self-determination.
So it's against international law?
The ICJ has concluded that, yes.
And it still exists, and no action has ever been taken against?
The wall still exists,
Yeah.
No action has been taken. Settlers are still moving over, which means the wall might even get extended to include those settlements.
This began in 2004.
No, it began before that, but in 2004 the ICJ provided an advisory opinion. The advisory opinion generated significant international attention and debate, highlighting the ongoing legal and humanitarian complexities of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. In 2005, Israel, overcoming huge political pushback domestically and the terror onslaught during the Second Intifada, withdrew from the Gaza Strip, dismantling its settlements and military installations in the name of peace. This is now referred to as an open-air prison, as Dims has mentioned before. Actually, let me correct myself. I heard someone told me it's not an open-air prison because you get to leave from a prison. It's a concentration camp.
Also, normally they're legal. You said this is against international law, so it's an illegal open-air prison.
Yeah, but like Nizar said, once you're in prison, you can leave once you've done your time. But when you're in a concentration camp, you can't leave.
You only leave dead.
You only leave.
By death, yeah.
Yeah, by death.
And we have to remember, Israel controls gas, electricity, water, fuel. Everything that goes into the Gaza Strip is first scrutinized by Israel.
Going back to what we said earlier at the beginning, that it's not really a conflict, although they call it a conflict, because it's not equal.
Don't forget surveillance as well. Constant surveillance.
Yeah, if you watch one of the latest documentaries, they show that they have drones flying over the Gaza Strip constantly, day and night. 2006, a very important year. War breaks out between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon. But also, in January of 2006, Hamas wins the Palestinian legislative elections and they form the Palestinian Authority government.
So let's rephrase that. They were elected as a governing body.
Who? Hamas?
Yes.
Or as you would say correctly, it's
Hamas!
Right.
Yeah, you are right. And this is another argument that the Israelis use for the collective punishment of the Gaza Strip. They elected Hamas. They elected Hamas because the Fatah had become corrupt and they no longer wanted Fatah in charge of the PLO. With Hamas winning the election, this started a bitter civil war within the Palestinian diaspora. You had Fatah fighting Hamas. In June of 2007, Hamas, who was considered a terrorist organisation by Israel, the US, UK and EU, took control of the Gaza Strip, following violent clashes with its rival Palestinian faction Fatah.
So let me get this right. If they were mutants, PLO would be Charles Xavier and Hamas would be Magneto.
Correct, yes. So all of a sudden Hamas becomes the elected body and the entire world now designates them a terrorist organization. Also in 2007, Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert and Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas, with the support of the US, launched the Annapolis Conference. The goal was to reach a peace agreement that would lead to the establishment of a Palestinian state. Hamas called for all parties to boycott the conference. Because do remember, Hamas was the elected representative, but the West would not recognize this.
That's dictatorship from the outside. Like that's unheard of. It's like literally another country dictating what happens in another country.
It's not unheard of because the US has instilled Hosni Mubarak. They've also put in Sisi.
Puppets, basically.
Puppets.
Yes, exactly.
Perfect. Moving on to 2008, Israel attacks the Gaza Strip in what it calls Operation Cast Iron Lead. This is in response to rocket attacks from Gaza.
That's the thing. So when they print this in the newspaper, you would hear rocket attacks. And you've got to think, like, why have they done that? If you look at all the history, they don't mention that. They don't mention what's going on. They just take out one little bit. And what kind of operations cast iron lead anyway?
Dims, I think you're quite right there. I've seen caricatures that portray this perfectly. What you see on the TV screen is whatever the camera can see. And all they show you is the rocket landing on Israeli territory. But if you zoom out, you'll actually see the Gaza Strip on fire. Why are the Gazans lashing out like this? Their houses are being raided, when their citizens are being arrested, when their children are being murdered, when they can't get food, no one is watching.
They can't even move around freely in their own homes, in their own towns and cities.
Apartheid.
Yes, exactly.
Apartheid. Limited control.
But that's what they're trying to do anyway. But they have constant surveillance on them. That's what it is. They can see exactly through their homes anyway what they're doing. So there's nothing hidden.
And these rocket launches, they're not really doing much damage anyway. It's like a desperate attempt to like leave us alone. You know, it's just that.
Or even to get the world's attention, because unfortunately that is one problem. This conflict has been going on since 1948 and a little bit before as well. But no one has paid attention.
Yeah, no, I think you've demonstrated a good point because especially what's going on now with the current conflict, the media will have you believe this all began on the 7th of October. But as you've clearly demonstrated here, Niz, you've done a fantastic job in showing us this has been a long, drawn-out oppression.
Don't fall for that. When they say to you, this began on the 7th of October, it didn't. The level of oppression that the Palestinian people are having to suffer is not fair. It's unbearable, and they shouldn't have to lash out the way they do. The international community can easily get Israel to step in line and allow Palestine to exist, to create its own state, but they won't.
That we just said minutes ago, and because they've got puppets in place and they've got puppet masters pulling the strings.
Then again, in 2009, another puppet master, US President Barack Obama, attempted to revive the Israeli-Palestinian peace talks shortly after taking office in 2009. At a speech at Cairo University that year, Obama reiterated his support for a two-state solution. We keep on hearing of a two-state solution, but no one ever seems to deliver.
It's just like a carrot that they dangle in front of you. You know you're never going to get the carrot, but it's just being dangled there as a fake possibility.
And the carrot is there to show the world, look, we're trying to be nice to them.
It's a facade, really, isn't it?
Facade, yes.
I mean, yeah, you've got to ask yourself, like, we're all people here. It doesn't matter what religion, colour, faith, background you're like. If you were in that position, what would you do? You know, that happened to you, your family. Obviously, you're not going to do nothing. You're going to do something, aren't you?
Exactly.
Out of
Yeah,
desperation.
100%.
But the media never looks at why they've retaliated. So here's Barack Obama coming in 2009 saying he's going to try and restart the negotiations. But then in 2012, Israel attacks Gaza once more in what it calls Operation Pillar of Defense. And again, Israel's claim this is due to rocket launches from Gaza.
Where would Gaza get these rockets from anyway?
The narrative would be Iran.
That's the narrative, yes.
But the thing is rockets are not doing anything. They're not really causing any damage. And they don't have this iron dome.
Yeah, that would have caused more damage than any rockets fired from Gaza anyway.
And I think the UN is trying the best it can with its hands tied behind its back. Because in 2012, In November, the General Assembly adopted Resolution 67/19, granting Palestine the status of non-member observer state in the UN. Then, in 2013, direct negotiations between Israel and Palestine are held following an initiative by US Secretary of State John Kerry to restart the peace process. And then it all breaks down again. In 2014, Israel launches the biggest assault on Gaza since 1967, Operation Protective Edge.
Here we go again, the third attack. Doesn't Israel understand to stop once and for all? Always, constantly, attack, attack, attack.
Diplomacy doesn't seem to be on their list of agendas.
They're not ones to listen. They actually want to be the ones who are leading it. This Operation Protective Edge apparently is due to 3 Israeli teenagers who were abducted and killed by Hamas terrorists while hitchhiking in the West Bank.
It happened in the West Bank, but they attacked Gaza.
So at that time, they attacked Gaza and the West Bank. They attacked the West Bank because of the 3 Israeli teenagers who were killed. And they attacked Gaza because, again, the rocket fire. And getting back to the West Bank, in 2016, the UN Security Council adopts Resolution 2334, stating that Israel's settlement activity constitutes a flagrant violation of international law and has no legal validity.
So they're breaking international law, and the international law governing body is doing nothing about it.
Nothing, and neither are the West, and neither are the countries. The countries who set up the ICJ and the UN are not willing to actually enact the resolutions that United Security Council is adopting.
I'm trying to be balanced here. I really don't want to side with anyone, but it's like they're in direct violation of international law. No one's doing anything about it. So can you blame them for just trying anything out of desperation to bring attention to, hey, look what's going on here? There
is no method of recourse for the Palestinians. They have no other voice. And that's all they've said. I've watched a couple of TikToks, some YouTube's shorts, and all the Palestinians are saying, don't allow our voices to fall silent. Yeah. Let the world know what's happening. We're going to continue with our timeline, and we now come to 2017. United States President Donald Trump announces that the United States would recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel.
Isn't that part of the Abraham Accords?
Not recognizing it. What they're supposed to do is, first of all, recognize borders, and then what the Palestinians would like is they would like East Jerusalem as a capital of any Palestinian state. And Donald Trump has come in and unilaterally decided that Jerusalem is Israel's capital.
But that's wrong. Jerusalem has not just one religious state, but 3.
Exactly, which is under the UN resolution, it would have been known as the international city. Once Donald Trump makes this announcement, in 2018, the United States moves its embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem.
Oh, so they have an embassy in Jerusalem? I didn't know that.
The United States does.
Oh, okay.
This decision, announced by President Trump, sparked controversy and garnered widespread international attention. The move was significant because it recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital, a status that had long been disputed due to competing claims by Israelis and Palestinians. The relocation was praised by Israel but condemned by the Palestinians and much of the international community, as it was seen as prejudicing the outcome of any future peace negotiations between Israelis and Palestinians. To make things worse, Donald Trump in 2020 unveiled the Peace to Prosperity. The plan presented a vision for a 2-state solution.
Oh, here we go again. I wonder who's going to die this time.
Yeah, but you got to see this plan that he had.
Sounds good, don't it? What's it called again?
Peace to Prosperity.
Oh yeah, nice ring to that.
This included Israeli sovereignty over some settlements in the West Bank and land swaps. The plan also included an economic component, which was unveiled in June 2019 at a conference in Bahrain, that promised $50 billion in new investment for Palestinians. I remember seeing the map for this. The Palestinians were left with almost nothing, no territory, for over 2 million people. It was unthinkable.
And the capital of Israel was still in Jerusalem.
Was still in Jerusalem,
proposal.
Yes. Yeah. But as part of Donald Trump's peace process, he also started the Abraham Accords. These were signed in 2020 as a series of historic agreements that led to the normalization of diplomatic, economic and cultural relations between Israel and Arab countries. These included the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. and later the joint declaration with Morocco. So if you remember before, these countries are signing agreements with America, but America is stating that they'll only support these Arab nations as long as they normalize ties with Israel. So these Arab countries are sellouts. Again and again, we see Israel fighting small little wars. In 2021, an 11-day war erupted between Israel and Hamas.
You say war.
It's not a war, no.
Yeah. They call it war. When you have a war, isn't it two
Equal size.
fighting against each other?
Yeah.
Or a fair war, combat. Two armies that go
Fighting
to war,
each
right?
other, yeah.
Not one army against ragtag civilians with stones and sticks and maybe a few guns, if that.
And that's what it is, basically. You said before, rockets. Yeah, these rockets aren't sophisticated that they're using. Mostly, you've got kids in Israeli jails for throwing stones. Would we even see that here in the West? So why is the so-called only democracy in the Middle East allowed to put children in jail?
Again, war loosely. How come there's no light shed on these wars? You're talking about it. How long was this?
11 days in 2021.
Didn't hear about it yet. 7th of October is imprinted on everyone's brains because mainstream news media are printing that everywhere.
Picked it up and ran with it,
But-
yes.
Yeah, but getting back to your timeline is so this war, tell us more about
So
it, please.
this time it was specifically over the Al-Aqsa mosque and the eviction disputes in East Jerusalem neighbourhood of Sheikh Jarrah. A ceasefire was brokered on the 21st of May of that year, but then in 2022 there was a 3-day conflict. Also in 2022, the General Assembly adopts Resolution 77/23 on the 30th of November 2022, requesting that the committee to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the Nakba, or the catastrophe, for the first time in its history of the UN.
Explain that to me again. I do get it, but Sol, you know a bit about this. What's this again? The Nakba.
Well, Nakba is the situation where all the Palestinians were displaced
Originally.
yeah.
When Israel was founded in
Yeah.
1948.
1948, yeah. So
They call it the catastrophe.
yeah.
Nakba meaning catastrophe.
Okay.
So it's been 75 years since the incident. So it's more of a recognizing, recognizing the situation
it took them
that's happened.
75 years to recognise it as an event.
They wanted to celebrate it to bring it to people's attention.
Yeah.
But we do have to remember they also do hold a day every year in solidarity with the
yeah.
Palestinian people
It's the 29th of November
each year.
each year.
Now getting to 2023. As I've mentioned before, the Israelis have always tried to portray that Palestine never existed. They have no right. And in March of 2023, Israeli Finance Minister Smotrich, while speaking in Paris, openly denied the existence of the Palestinian ethnic group, quote, an invention of the past century. The US issued a rebuke and the UN called on Israel to disavow the comments. As well as condemning the comments, Jordan summoned the Israeli ambassador because Smotrich used a map portraying Jordan as part of the Jewish state's territory during his talk. So if you remember, I mentioned the Greater Israel.
They had that in their uniform.
Irgun had that as part of their emblem, their badge. Everyone knows what happened on October the 7th of 2023. But what happened in the rest of the year? Why is that never spoken of? In 2023, about 4,000 Palestinians were displaced due to policies and practices implemented by the Israelis, all contributing to a coercive environment in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem. A total of 1,152 Palestinians, including 575 children, were displaced when the Israeli authorities demolished or forced them to demolish their homes, citing lack of Israeli-issued building permits. This is one of the methods that Israel uses when trying to destroy Palestinian villages and build Jewish settlements.
Yeah, you're right, Niz, how the mainstream media always reports October the 7th and discards what happened earlier that year, 2023.
Yeah, but here I wanted to talk about displaced Palestinians. The numbers that I've given was displaced in the West Bank, and these are the highest ever recorded by the OCHA for a single year. On a sadder note, up to the 4th of October 2023, the IOF, the Israeli Occupation Force, attacks had killed 234 Palestinians.
Say that again.
Up to the 4th of October 2023, IOF attacks had killed 234 Palestinians.
Murdered 234 Palestinian civilians.
Yep, and amongst those there was 47 children and 6 women. If Israel has a right to defend itself, Palestinians have a right to defend themselves. And those were deaths.
Prior October 7th. Let's get that clear.
So you see, people, it didn't all begin on October the 7th.
And these deaths, or these numbers that I'm giving, these are only for 2023.
So get it right, it actually began, if you want to go recently, the 4th.
And I've only mentioned the deaths yet. During that same period, 9,370 Palestinians, this included 1,400 children, 231 women and 20 journalists, were injured in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip.
What? When was this again?
This is in 2023 up to the 4th of October.
So before 7th of October, this... Say that figure again, please. That's shocking.
So 234 Palestinians were killed. 9,370 Palestinians were injured. These children with injuries, they're traumatized.
Yes.
And they're injured for life.
Mm-hmm.
And the children, they're innocent.
Got nothing to do with this.
Up to October 2023, it had been the deadliest year for Palestinians in the West Bank since the UN began recording in 2005. This happened across Gaza and in the West Bank in places such as Nablus, Kafar, Qadam, Beita, Hawara and Jenin. This brings us to October 7th.
The supposed date it all began, quote unquote.
In conclusion, periodic escalations in violence, including clashes in Jerusalem and Gaza, have continued. Efforts towards peace negotiations have faced significant challenges, with issues such as settlements, the status of Jerusalem, and the right of return for Palestinian refugees remaining unresolved. The Israel-Palestine conflict is deeply rooted in historical, religious, and political complexities. A balanced understanding requires acknowledging the perspectives and grievances of both Israelis and Palestinians. While significant efforts have been made towards peace, the path forward remains challenging and necessitates ongoing dialogue and compromise.
Well, Niz, usually I find your history lessons incredibly boring, but I must say this one was quite intriguing. I learnt lots. I'm sure the audience did too. So thank you for all your hard work. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate what you've said. Thank you very much. And I want to advise the audience, go out and do your own research. Don't believe what you see on the news. Don't believe it started on the 7th of October. Go and check my facts. Go and find your own facts. Just make sure you go to reliable sites.
Yeah, and that was important to us as well with this episode. There's a lot of division going on in the world right now. It's not even about Muslim, Jew. It's not about right. It's about right and wrong. It's about humanity. So, like Niz said, the facts are out there, guys. We've tried to compile them together for you in this episode, but you can fact check us as much as you like, and we hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next week. Thanks for listening. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.